Hello there, this is Bibi Cameron here, and today I want to share with you super duper easy ideas to create partially die-cut card bases. I made some similar cards for a previous blog post and I got some questions about how to make them, so today's video is all about that. I'm going to be using new supplies by Coloradocraft company. They are releasing some mini stamp sets. I only got this one and also 3 different 6 by 6 inches stamp sets. What is different about these stamp sets designed by Anita Jeram for Coloradocraft is that they include large illustrations, and of course this also includes dies. And I like to stamp this kind of illustrations on Strathmore watercolor paper using Versa Fine Onyx Black ink, and also using the help of the MISTI to achieve sharp stamped images. Once the stamping is done, I like to apply colors using water-based markers. This is easy and quick, and I have previous videos explaining how I do this. And then I'm going to die cut the images using coordinating dies. I also like to use this low tack tape to hold the dies in place. We don't want to accidentally cut the image in half after spending some time doing coloring. So it's very important to make sure that the die is securely attached to the paper while we run this through the die cutting machine. To save watercolor paper, I like to stamp the images as close as possible, but sometimes you cannot place all the dies on the panel because the images are too close. So you have to die cut some images first, and after that die cut any other image you might have on the panel. So here we have the super cute images. Remember, you can add colors in many different ways and also using different mediums. And the next we are going to be making is the card bases. So I'm going to grab an A4 sheet of cardstock and I'm going to cut this at 4.5 inches. And the next piece is going to be cut at 4 inches. And that's it. Now I'm going to use the widest piece that measures 4 inches by 8.25, or if you use an American A4 sheet of cardstock, that will be 4 inches by 8.5. Now I'm going to score this piece at 1/2 inch, just like that, so that we have a side fold. This is going to be the front panel of the card and is the panel we are going to be die cutting. Now you can choose any of the images for this card, and I'm going to use this one here. So I need to grab the coordinating die and I'm going to place it just there because I want this image to go partially die cut at the bottom of that panel. To keep the die in place, I'm going to use low tack tape, and I'm going to place this on my die cutting machine like so. Now I'm going to place the other cutting plate over the portion of the paper I want to die cut or partially die cut, just like that. And then we are going to run this through the die cutting machine. I love the Spellbinder's Platinum die cutting machine because the edges of the plates doesn't impose the paper while doing partial die cutting. Okay, the next thing we are going to do is to cut the excess of paper out of that front panel. And to do this, you can use any cutting tool you might have. I'm going to remove the excess paper, but because this is a very intricate die cut, I need to be careful to be able to do that. And now that this is done, I'm going to trim the corners of this flap like so, and I'm going to use Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to adhere this to that backing panel. And by doing this, we are going to be able to see the flap inside, but we are going to be covering that with a decorative inner panel. To make that panel, we are going to cut a piece of cardstock that measures the same than the backing of the card base, and we are going to use stencils to decorate it. And in the video description and in my blog, you will be able to find the ink colors I use to make each project. After finishing this panel, I also decided to do some stenciling on the front panel, and to protect the backing and also the inside, I'm using a piece of cardstock. I just want to make sure that any ink on the glass mat won't transfer at the back of my card base. And I'm also going to leave that piece of cardstock there while gluing this die cut over the card base, because I don't want the glue to smear on that background panel. Now all I have to do is to glue this inner panel like so. I then trim any excess of cardstock that I have around the edges, and I also added other stamped images from the stamp set, sentiments, and the card was done. So this is another way to make a super duper easy card base. Here you can see another sample using the same technique, but for this one here, I partially die cut a C6 card base. So I didn't glue together two pieces of cardstock to make the card base, and you can do that by using a large format die cutting machine. The second card base I want to share with you is this one here. This is super easy and quick, and here I have another sample made using the same technique. I just find that these illustrations and the coordinating dies are perfect to do this. So for this card, or for this kind of cards, we are going to make a card base. This is a slim line card base, and this measures initially 4.5 inches by 8.25. I like to make my card bases a little bit larger, and then I trim any excess of paper, so that will be maybe a slightly smaller size. Then I find a placement I'm happy with for that die, and I'm going to run this through the die cutting machine folded. It's key to use 240 grams cardstock to make this card base, and I will advise to avoid using plates that are too worn and that has a lot of marks like this one here. That one, just put it to a side. I'm going to try to use plates that doesn't have too many indentations, and that will avoid or prevent transferring all those marks to this paper. So I keep in my stash plates that are almost new to do partial die cutting. You can also partially die cut your images in a diagonal. It seems that it doesn't make a big difference, but it does. So you can choose how to place these on the die cutting machine depending on the shape or the extra shape you want to add to your card bases. You only need to make sure that when you run this through the machine, the edges of the paper won't go through the machine, because you will ruin your card base. So in this case, I'm going to cut this like so. I'm not going to run this completely through the die cutting machine. I'm just moving this backwards and forwards various times, or up to 6 times, so that I make sure that I'm cutting through all that paper. And I also got the Spellbinders logo on my paper, but I'm not worried about it because I'm going to cut the top edge of the card base. I hope you can see there as well that I don't have any mark on the paper from the cutting plates, and this is the look and feel we are looking for. As you see there, you can also use scissors to finish cutting the card bases, or to help yourself to have a better edging. And that's pretty much it. You will say, oh, Bibi teach us some silly things to do. But people were asking me how to do this, and it's a lot easier than it looks. So let me know if this is something you would like to do or to try the next time you are crafting. I'm going to share a last idea to die cut your card bases. This one could be as tricky as you want it to be, but today I'm going to share the easy peasy way to do this. I'm going to start by making a 5.5 inches square card base. And I'm also going to cut a piece of paper that measures 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches. Then I'm going to die cut the card base using a square die to create a square window in the front panel of that card base. And using this die, I'm going to partially die cut that piece of cardstock. The first time I made this, I actually partially die cut the card base, and then using a craft knife, I cut around the image the excess of paper to make the frame. But that's a lot of work, so we can save time by doing this. So we are going to actually cheat on the technique to make it easy. And once I have this piece ready, I'm going to stick this behind the frame like so. And then I trim any excess of cardstock. Once this is done, I can do some ink blending in the front panel, or I can just leave it like that and adhere my image on top, and that will be a very nice card. You can also add acetate in the back of this. You can also make a checker. The sky's the limit, but we are going to keep it simple. And I'm just going to apply a little bit of ink at the bottom of this panel. I'm not being worried about making any perfect blending. As you see there, it really doesn't matter. And once you have laid down some ink there, you can then spray a little bit of water and dry this up straight away using a kitchen towel. You don't want your cardstock to be soaking wet because that will make the paper to bend and to get a bizarre shape, and that's the card base, so it needs to be as flat as possible. So we haven't finished yet, okay? We are going to add the die cut image over this area here, and you have to bear in mind that this partially die cut image is floating there. So the top portion of the image needs to be connected to the card base somehow. I'm going to do that by using a die cut star. You can use a heart, you can use anything else, or even a sentiment. I choose to glue this star in a way that the top portion of the star is going to be off the page, because I'm going to place this card in a 6 by 6 inches envelope. That might be okay, but depending of the project, I will really prefer to keep the die cuts and everything inside the edges of the card base, so that the card base will protect the elements on the card, and it's easy to mail these kind of cards. For a nice finish inside the card, you can also add a die cut frame to cover all those raw edges. You can also add a white die cut behind the die cuts that you made out of watercolor paper, because the watercolor paper is different in color, so you might be able to see the difference in color behind the front panel of the card. But today I'm just going to leave it like that. So this card base is done. It's a very simple design, but you can build up from here. You don't need to add a sentiment to this card, but if you want to, you can just stamp in the inside of the card, or you can also add a banner at the front of the card base. For this card here, I didn't add a sentiment neither. It seems like for this kind of designs, I don't feel keen to use sentiments, but the sky's the limit. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do not forget to subscribe to my channel or to visit my blog for more ideas and inspiration. Please remember that the supply list is in the video description. Also a link to my blog and to other videos I have made using Anita Jeram's stamps for Colorado Craft Company. Thank you very much for watching and happy crafting. Bye!